stress is really, really good for you in the right amounts. And if you don't have stress, you're going to end up being complacent. Your life is going to be destroyed. Life loses sweetness. You don't grow, you don't evolve. Stress is fantastic. When you understand how focus works, when you understand how energy levels work, how sleep works, all of these things, when you understand it, you're able to leverage it a lot more. So even when something goes wrong, you know how to get to that thing. Majority of entrepreneurs are the bottleneck in their company. And you learn that the more effective you are in terms of performance, the better you perform as a leader of a company, a CEO, whatever, COO, the more effective the whole company is going to be.
You built a system, you think it's set for life, and all of a sudden, everything comes down crashing. You started building your morning routines, you started building the company structures, but all of a sudden, everything just starts crashing. And every time you try to build the systems again, they keep on crashing. Is this just the nature of systems, or are you doing something wrong? Watch this episode to find out. So, Fawaz, today we're going to break down why every system degrades naturally over time. We're going to look at also how we can spot failure before it happens, and we're going to look at the exact framework to build systems that survive in the long term.
Look, let's be real. Majority of you actually don't notice, and this is the reality with majority of entrepreneurs, right? They don't notice that their systems are destroyed until it's too late, right? So by the time you're fixing it, you've already lost revenue. Your relationships are down, right? You've lost good employees. Loads of issues have come, and you've kind of spiraled into chaos. Why? Because the best businesses, right, and the best lives aren't necessarily built on great systems. They're built on systems that survive failure. And that's what we're supposed to get at today, inshallah. Now, this is really important to understand because, look, every client, I deal with, I have systems, and, I'm all for building systems, but over time, these systems always break, and we have to understand that that's naturally just how systems work. Systems will break over time. Now, is there a solution to this? Yes. And as you watch to the end of this podcast, you'll find out exactly what the solution is. But systems do break over time.
You see, one of the things is before we even talk about kind of how the systems break, I think first we need to introduce the area of like interconnectedness, because if we think about it, we're always talking about systems, and they're all like individual, right? Okay, but we also understand that, look, the systems that we have into maintaining our family, the system we have to have in personal, and this and that, it's so many different systems that don't only depend on you. So like, how are you able to actually maintain that even though, there's so many different people, so many different variables? Is that not like naturally going to just break down?
That's the thing, right? A lot of the times when one area of your life starts to deal with imbalance, it starts to creep into the other areas, right? It's very simple. I can name you a million examples, right? For example, like, we had a system with one of our clients in terms of how his family, ibadah, everything. But as his company started to scale, the system became broken. It started with his business systems, right? They broke first. And because his business systems broke first, now naturally there is sort of like, a spillover effect. That breaking down of his business then causes him to change, in terms of his fitness and spend less time and relationships, etc., on and on and on, right? So naturally, of course, everything is interconnected, right? Your family is a system, your relationships, we've went through the systems of you developing as a person, right? Your health, physical and mental, your spiritual well-being as well, your self-management, all of these things are part of what? Of a system, all right? And then you have your business systems. Now, it's easy to understand that they are correlated, right? I don't think I need to sit here and convince any entrepreneur as to why his spiritual, his relationship with Allah is connected to how his business performance is connected to his family, right? So many times we've seen, even for example, diagrams like this, where it's like, the triangle of the relationship, and both of the people are on the bottom, the husband and the wife are on one side, and they meet, and Allah's on the top. Meaning what? The closer they become to Allah, the closer they become to each other, right? And we understand naturally as well in business, right, that your company is going to have a lot more success, a lot more barakah in your time when you're closer to Allah. So all of these things we understand are correlated. You can 100% guarantee that somebody who's physically healthy, mentally is 100% operating from a better place than someone who is what? Physically unhealthy. Does that make sense? And even though that's mentally speaking, right? So of course, all of these things are interconnected, or every system is interconnected, because systems don't stay effective on their own. You need to design for systems failure. failure, all right? And this is a very, very big thing. You have to design for systems failure before it happens. Part of actually a system, another system, is designing what happens when a system starts to lack, when entropy starts to creep in, which we'll talk about what entropy is and why it happens, etc. Right? That's what separates the amateurs from the actual high operators. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you started to kind of touch into the point, but like I want to understand fundamentally why did the systems break in the first place?
Okay, there's a couple of laws. When you look at external laws, universal laws that actually talk about why systems break, there's many, right? No matter how good a system is, eventually it's going to break. A lot of people think that their systems break because they weren't designed good enough. It's not that your system wasn't designed good enough, it's that you hadn't designed systems failure within the system as well, right? So there's more Murphy's law, which is anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Essentially meaning if you assume nothing is going to break, you're in trouble. You can't assume that issues aren't going to happen in your system, that, oh, well, I've designed this thing, so it's, it's going to be perfect. No. You need to set up, for example, like an automated email system for customer flows. One day, let's say the integration fails. Let's say, we know, like, for example, you have Zapier, this thing goes to this thing, goes to this thing, and no one notices for 2 months. That's a big issue. Right? So the fact that you had that automation on the back end and it was broken, but it wasn't being checked, it was broken, and now you've lost plenty leads. All right? Okay. Because, and we had this issue at one stage in our company, right? So, we had the system set, all of the zaps, the automations were coming through. After this, you have your sequence, your logic boards, etc. Everything was working. And then, we're noticing a decrease in lead flow, right? Like, 2-3 weeks in. It's like, yeah, we just lost like 2-3 weeks worth of leads because the automations weren't working. All right. So naturally systems do break. A personal life, for example, let's say, and we've had this example in our personal lives, right? On average, guys, I go to bed 10, 11. Between 10 and 11, I'm in bed. I'm going to sleep, gone. Right? Last couple of days, I've had guests. It's not my choice. I can't just tell them, look, guys, I'm going to sleep. Bye-bye, because I'm a super... No, of course, you have to... Karam duyuf, yani. You have to be generous and take care of your guests, right? So again, that breaks my rhythm. I'm going to sleep tired. So I'm going to sleep, very late. Waking up late. So now my morning routine is a bit lagged. Does that make sense? So always assume failure and build in redundancies like automated alerts, manual checks, backup systems. So it's about understanding, like, although this could happen, what's the next thing? Let's say this thing happens. And a lot of the times people feel, but me, I'm the type of person, I don't like to build ifs. Right? I don't like to spend time thinking, if this happens, no, but it's like, we understand that things consistently happen. So it's about being left for another system to fix that when it occurs, right? So for example, we have guests all the time, right? Now, like not all the time, but we have guests a lot. So now I've built a system that I understand that, in the event of etc., how do I catch up and keep up the next morning, right?
Yeah. One of the things is, so obviously, like you mentioned, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. One of the ways that we've actually implemented this before is, especially you have like kind of like a sixth sense when it comes to like people, especially when it comes to people, like, okay, I know kind of where this guy is trying to go to based on how they speak. And that comes back down to the core, which is what awareness.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was a time where certain team members, we've seen how they started to act and this, we're like, okay, well, I can already see this one is looking like most likely within the next couple of weeks, couple of days, he's going to be gone out of the company. And we already started to prepare these things from the back end because, again, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And even if it doesn't end up happening, you've already created a system for if, and again, that probably brings me to another question then. Like, how do you know if you're being too extreme with the ifs?
Look, it's quite simple, right? Like I said, I don't create situations for ifs. It's like, what is likely to happen here, and having the awareness to see something is happening and understanding that in the case that this happens, which will likely happen, what's the next steps we can take? And it's making sure that we're covered, right? So for example, let's say our team member, things are even if everything is good with the team member, it's nice to have another couple of lists of people who do that same role, right? That I can reach out to, worst case scenario, right? So it's about understanding that naturally systems are going to break, right? And we'll talk about more how to build the systems failure part. Okay. I just want to go on to the second actual thing, which is a main thing, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard me use this word a lot. It's one of my favorite words, entropy. So what does entropy mean? Entropy is actually from, it's physics, right? It's a scientific term. It means it's in thermodynamics, right? So it means that, things energy will naturally move to what? Chaos, right? So anywhere where there's energy, essentially everything naturally moves towards disorder unless you maintain it. Meaning if you don't take care of things, naturally they get worse over time. You can look at anything, a car, right? Your life, your business. If you don't take care of these things again and again and again, eventually it just moves to chaos, right? It's like, for example, let's say right now you get a trim, you get your thorpe cleaned, everything, you step out of the house, fantastic, right? Well, if you don't continue to take care of yourself, naturally what happens, although you're nice and neat now, you're going to move to chaos, right? You're going to get messy, dirty, etc., right? It's just natural wear and tear, right? So just like your house, it gets dusty if you don't clean it. All right, your business, your personal systems, they degrade over time. That's just naturally how it works. So if you look at your business, let's say you have your hiring process is strong, but as the team grows, people naturally will start to take shortcuts. You know, now the culture of the company is slipping, the vision is slipping. You know, everyone starts to, you know, take these shortcuts, right? Even though at the start it's nice and strong. And this is the mistake a lot of companies make, right? Even with your vision as an individual, right? So you have your vision. Everything is clear. You know exactly what you're doing. But when you don't revisit that, naturally you'll move to chaos. So naturally you just start doing things, right? It moves to disorder. So let's say Ramadan, for example, right? You start Ramadan strong, you're praying on time, you're reading Quran. By week 3, your sleep schedule, it's messed up. You're missing suhoor. Things get crazy. It's natural. Things move to what? Chaos, right? So now, a quick fix to that, obviously we'll go on and break this down, is to actually schedule maintenance sessions, right? And systems audits, which you have to do. But we'll talk about this more on the podcast, right? But don't assume things are going to be consistent. Or because life is good now, you're foolish if you think life is going to be great forever. You need to create systems to make sure life is great forever. And if life gets any less great, you have systems to, again, protect you from that, all right? Okay. Now, then we have Gold's Law, right? Which is complex systems that work evolved or from... complex systems that work evolve from simple ones, right? So the more complex your system is, the more likely it actually is to break. Really? And this is, again, something you're going to see time and time again. When you have a system that's like super extreme, it's like super crazy, it's difficult to get this done. It's like, for example, even people's goals, you see it, like they have this goal. It's far more likely to break because there's so many different stages to the things you need to do, all right? If you look at business, let's say the best processes in business and the best frameworks, even if you're selling something, the best framework, and people understand this, is the ones with the least amount of steps. Why? Because there's a greater likelihood of making sure every one of those steps is done well, right? Than having 15 or 20 step sales process, right? So, and every stage, let's say, for example, needs approval, etc. After a few months, naturally, because people are lazy, and this thing has so much steps, again, people are going to skip it. They're going to make errors. They're going to make mistakes. Does that make sense?
That's a big thing because majority of companies, once they get to this mindset of, I want to build systems, because every entrepreneur is talking about systems, but these are the things that they don't really take into consideration. And what's the first thing that they do? They start to look at, okay, well, which is the steps that we take in the sense of we're looking at where entropy is likely to kick in. You're looking at, okay, where can I delegate? Where can I be more efficient? But what they do is they go over extreme, in terms of building SOPs. And what ends up happening is they have these 15-page booklets on how you can do this and this.
No one's reading that.
And no one's reading it.
Precisely, bro.
And it's like, why didn't you get it done? I gave you the full blueprint because you're not taking all these things into consideration.
Yeah, like even for example, like a morning routine. If you look at why majority of people's morning routines don't work, it's because they're so detailed, right? The step-by-step process. So the second one thing goes wrong, it's like that. Suddenly, like everything's collapsed, right? So it's about understanding. Start with this most simple possible. Naturally, again, it will become more complex, right? Naturally, but it should start simple. Right? And your goal is to always keep it as simple as possible. Like there's so many times, like for example, like I would design something. I'm like, yeah, that's way too complicated. How can I like cut this in half? And you can. Trust me, a lot of the times you can. Right? So it's about looking for a system that is simple. Because if you start with the simplest possible system, if people need to bypass, like if you see people constantly like skipping your systems or skipping the way you're doing things, it's likely overcomplicated. Does that make sense?
I think also one of the ways the system would break, because like I think we mentioned at the start of the podcast, we have a lot of variables and a lot of people that are kind of in control of this, that are within this system. If you as the operator of that system start to lack and start to wash down on your principles, eventually what you're creating that, culture of other people also be like, yeah, well, if he didn't take that so seriously.
And that's exactly what we mentioned, right? So that's naturally people start to deter and wear out over time, right? It's the same thing. It's sort of similar to, you know, when you're really motivated, you're passionate about something and you're working on that thing million head on, boom, bam, right? But then naturally what happens, you just slowly start to care a little bit less, you know? And if you don't remind yourself and rejog that spark, that fire, it's going to travel the whole way through the system, all right? And this is what, like, a lot of the times, if you look inside a company, you can actually see that the operator is the one causing all of the issues, right? And it reminds me of the statement of the Kafir. He says, majority of times and majority of organizations, the bottleneck is at the top of the bottle, right? Meaning what? When you look at a bottle, what's the thinnest part? It's the bottle. That's where it's actually causing the liquid to come out very, very slowly of the bottle. Majority of entrepreneurs are the bottleneck in their companies, right? And you learn that the more effective you are in terms of performance, the better you perform as a, you know, operator, as a leader of a company, a CEO, whatever, COO, the more effective the whole company is going to be. All right. And again, we see this time and time and time again within the companies, right? People like, Fawaz, I literally did nothing. I just started to perform better. And now, you know, I feel like the whole company's back again, etc. It's because, yes, energy is felt, right? When people feel that you're serious, you're pushing forward, you do the things you're supposed to do, you're setting that culture. Culture is a big thing in company, right? And a lot of the times that companies start to suffer, it's because the culture in one way or another started to, you know, become soft. You know, they started to skip corners, cut corners in the way they do things. They forgot the effective ways to communicate, etc. Naturally, chaos is going to creep in.
And I think that's a point for anyone that hasn't, you know, that's not familiar with what we do when it comes to like designing people's lives and their businesses and stuff like that, to let them perform. Majority of the time, they don't understand that connectedness between your personal life and your business. You know, I think we've done a couple of podcasts on it, but it's extremely, extremely important. And we know when they say like 80%, it comes down to your personal performance, and the rest, it's like, if you don't know how to manage these things, you don't know how to manage yourself, then naturally entropy will kick in and it will destroy everything that you have. Like, if you can talk a little bit more kind of about how your personal bottlenecks will naturally affect the systems breaking down much quicker than, you know, than usual.
100%. And when you look at it, like, systems, like I said, people need to understand, and it will be really good to understand like what stage they could be, right? In terms of like systems failure, there's a couple of main stages we look at when we look at, like, you know, your systems are lacking, etc. And a lot of the times you're going to be in one of these three stages, right? And it's the same three sort of stages we take our clients through. So in the beginning, it's like, okay, like just bad design, right? So it's like in the beginning. Now, alhamdulillah, we don't deal with this with our clients because, you know, we just know how to design the most effective systems based on that information, you know. But if you're designing your own systems, you're going to struggle with bad design in the beginning. Meaning what? Like, it's not designed the way it should be. You're going to see that things aren't working. It's like the first time you ever design something, that's when you start to realize a lot of things are broken. Okay, this doesn't make sense. Let's say, for example, you build a morning routine or you build a sales sequence, but that doesn't really make sense because that comes after and it doesn't work. It's ineffective, right? Now, at this stage, what you need to do is engage in as much feedback loops as possible, all right? So you want to correct, test, correct, test, correct, test, correct, right? And you need to do it frequently. I see a lot of entrepreneurs, a problem with them is they build a system, but they don't even test the efficiency of it over time, all right? So for example, I'm constantly, like, I understand that, for example, a system that works for me when I'm in Morocco doesn't work when I'm in Dubai, all right? They're actually two completely different systems. Why? Dubai is like hours ahead, right? First of all, different society, more entropy, to be honest with you. The life is just more hectic, more crazy. When I'm here, there's a lot of variables that are different, all right? So in the beginning, even when although I had like a solid, you know, routine and a solid system in Dubai, when I came to Morocco, it did take, like, even my EA, she was like this is hectic for me. I was like, you know, this, I feel like.
And it comes back down to the same point of what systems cannot disassociate themselves
from the environment in which they operate in, precisely, right? So this is where, okay, we had to build new systems and a new way of life for when I'm here, right? Because what works, like I said, when I'm over there, Doesn't work when I'm over here. That's when we started to, alhamdulillah, design that whole process, right? So the point is, naturally, in the beginning, you're going to go through that phase where things are bad. You make strategy, and this is the reason why we work carefully with our clients, and this is where our clients are much more different. Majority of people, when they design strategies, they design them based off of assumptions. Right? They design them based off of assumptions, things that they think. We don't do that. First, we gather the data on our clients, which allows us to what? Come up with a clear design on their life, right? So instead of assumptions, you're actually using data to guide your morning routine or your business process, etc. Right? So rather than actually looking at I just want to do this and I want to do this and I assume, no, you're actually looking at what's the data saying. All right. And that's why a lot of times you'll notice that, like, for example, a business tries to do something new and then the ad cost skyrockets. Why? Because, again, they just made it based off an assumption. So that's the bad design phase, right? Then you go on to the next phase, which is where, like, you're actually just doing what you're supposed to do, right? So it's like, this is where, things are just happening, but naturally people start to, like, neglect processes, part of the journey, right? They start to cut corners, like we mentioned. It's sort of the neglect phase. It's operational decay, right? So, for example, your team starts building out SOPs, but over time, people start to take shortcuts, right? Personal example, right? You used to spend weekends with family, but now work is slowly creeping in. So the first week, you're like, yeah, just Saturday, just this one time, and then Sunday. And I pray 5 times in the mosque, but just today, and you start to slowly neglect your SOPs in the way of you do things, right? What happens? Again, they're affected, right?
It's like we hear this, a lot of entrepreneurs come with the same things. Like, what I start to, I start to follow, let's say, for example, I'm making content. Oh, subhanAllah, I haven't been putting my time for my Quran. Oh, subhanAllah, I haven't been able to give my family this and this. And because, again, first of all, it wasn't designed properly in the first place. So even if you try to, build these SOPs and this and that, it was poorly designed in the first place. So naturally, of course, you're going to start to enter into that, neglecting phase or whatever it is. And again, of course, naturally, everything's just start to crumble.
100%. And when you look at it, like, it's always going to be the same thing, right? You have to test your systems at a scale before rolling it out, right? And you need to make actual routine system checks, like weekly or monthly audits. Again, we do this for our clients, right? Because it's like, if you're not doing those audits, your systems will break over time. And this just goes directly back to the Feedback Loops podcast, right? Naturally, like we mentioned, there's always going to be entropy. So when you're not actually going back and seeking feedback on how can we improve this, how can we better this, it's the same thing. If you look at in relationships, it's the same thing, right? In the beginning, everything is fine, blah, 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 blah. And then you've gotten to a stage where you both can't stand each other. Why is that? Because again, had you started to audit and had you took care of the things and had you guys stopped neglecting the things that you're both supposed to do, the minor things, you wouldn't have got to this stage, right? So a lot of these problems, everyone has systems, by the way, just to clarify. Just people's systems are trash, number one. Whether you like it or not, we all operate on a systematic basis because naturally as human beings, that's how we are, right? Some people just have really whack, trash, 95% of entrepreneurs have whack, trash systems that they think work, but they don't, right? They're ineffective. They're just literally jogging between
So how
problems.
do you know, like, what a good system looks like?
We're going to get there, 100%, right? So the next thing we actually have, like I mentioned, is crisis mode. This is where majority of entrepreneurs find themselves by the time they come to us, right? So you've been ignoring problems, that neglect phase, you ignored it for a long time. Things were becoming worse, you didn't pay attention. You ignored it, right? So you ignore the fact that your teams, things are starting to change, people are feeling tired, and they get burnt out. Now your top performers are quitting, for example. Now people in your company, again, there was a lack of vision. There was a lack of, systems in terms of what to do. Now everyone's leaving the company and you're wondering why. Okay? Because you missed out on the neglect phase. You didn't see it. You weren't aware. And now you're in crisis mode, right? Or for example, right, and many times we see what entrepreneurs, we ignore our health, right? Grind. I sent you a text message the other day. I can't tell you how many, by the way, this is ridiculous. May Allah guide all of you, bisaraha. And I say this with serious conviction because you're misguiding the shabab out there. Stop preaching this culture of hustling when majority of you go in hospital. or you're sick, or now you've got an issue, or now a part of your body is. Do you get what I'm saying? Don't preach the hustle culture, because again, you missed out on the clear issues in the neglect phase, not taking care of your health, and now it's got to a stage where you have high blood pressure, or where there'll be like a heart attack happens, or something, a clear issue with your health, right? That's not. By the way, let me clarify something. When you go for a major like health issue like that, that's not as a result of something random. That's as a result of you neglecting the things you were supposed to take care of the whole time. That's your body now showing like this is after constant abuse. Now we've given up. You ignored all the early signs, and that's the neglect phase, where majority of people, like I said, they neglect, right? So how do you actually build systems that don't decay? You have to stress test them before scaling, right? So for example, like, test your systems under extreme circumstances. Like, does the system work in this kind of situation, right? If you look at it, Amazon shuts down random data centers to test failure responses. Yes, you have to be the one to test, like, for example, okay, this is my routine, but if this happens, how do I deal with it? Can it work, right? So test your systems under extreme conditions before you rely on them. Install tripwires. For example, if you mix 2 workouts, you have to get a reset plan. Now, this is actually really important, I found as well for myself, right? So it's if a day in some of my systems, like I lack for a couple of days or something happens, there's another system to get me back to where I'm supposed to be. Does that make sense? There's a system that introduces things slowly, right? So you can and you have to have clear benchmarks. Like, it shouldn't be in the crisis phase when you realize that things are going bad. All right. I've always said, if your company is like dropping in revenue to a point where now you can't pay salaries, there's a lot of things you're neglecting. There's a lot of things you're neglecting.
Not just one thing.
Yes, problems. Look, it's kind of like a thread, right? Let's say there's a loose thread on my thumb right now. If I ignore it and I ignore it and I ignore it long enough, that's going to become a massive hole, right? So it's the same thing. A lot of the issues in entrepreneurs' life, it's because of they neglected for so long, and that's the importance of actual reflection and feedback loops to make sure that systems never break, and you can see them before they fail. Does that make sense? So although they're not as effective, we're able to see that before it gets to total failure, because it's much more difficult to build a system that's failed than optimize one that's slowly becoming inefficient.
Okay, so I've actually tried to build, for any entrepreneur that's listening to this, he's probably like, look, I've tried to build these systems before, but just realistically, I just can't stick to them long term.
Yeah, again, and we see this multiple times. Your systems failed because you actually built them on willpower, not design. All right, you built these systems on your will, based on your willpower, not your design. Most entrepreneurs build systems that requires motivation and discipline. You see, at Live by Design, we're all about building systems that work, even if you're tired, even if you're distracted, you're overwhelmed, you have a million issues in your life, and showing you how to actually deal with that. Majority of people don't have, like, for example, a car. It has to have a system when it crashes, right? If you thought about that, they don't just build a car to run, right, and to move and etc. A car actually has a system that operates in when it crashes. That's when the airbag is deployed, etc., etc., etc. Right? So there's even a system for what in the event of a crash. If you look at planes, a plane can't leave the ground if it doesn't have certain things that happen in the event of what? It crashing and failing. So you need systems, and this is why we teach our clients to understand what is overwhelm, what is tiredness, what is distraction, all of these things, and how do we make sure we take care of them. Does that make sense?
We actually did a podcast before. I'd really recommend you guys to all watch it on burnout. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't take that burnout is a real thing and you're not doing all the steps, watch the podcast to find out kind of what you need to do. But if you're not taking into consideration all those different steps, naturally you're going to crash. And if you haven't created your business and the rest of your systems in a way to accommodate for that burnout, then again, everything will just come down crashing.
Precisely.
You'll never be able to.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you see, one of the things we do, like what I'm about a couple of things, right? Number one, I just like to design the whole process for you. I don't think you need to waste your time, right? We work with you, obviously not for you, but with you. That's the first thing, right? Number two, it's actually about understanding these things. Inshallah, on the podcast to come, I'm actually going to really break down the mind and why a lot of people become weak at certain points, mentally weakness. And I'm going to talk about burnout on all these things, because I actually got a silly message on my Instagram the other day. Someone goes that burnout is a result of a weak mind. If that is the case, I want to take him to the gym with me. And every single day, 7 days a week, me and him are going to lift the sickest weights. And wallahi, if he tells me one day his body can't do it anymore, then he has to admit that burnout is real. If your body has a threshold, so does your mind, by the way. Don't listen to these people, guys, right? And overwork your mind. But anyways, I'm gonna do a lot deeper podcasts on a lot of these things and a lot of deeper discussions, because these things are great, all right? And there's a lot of equations that will help you understand how the mind works, right? And why, like when and the benefit of it is when these situations occur, you're actually really able to understand what's happening. The reason majority of entrepreneurs fall apart when they feel overwhelmed or when they feel burnt out or when they can't focus, because they don't even understand these things. When you understand how focus works, when you understand how energy levels work, how sleep works, all of these things, when you understand it, you're able to leverage it a lot more. So even when something goes wrong, you know how to get to that thing. Does that make sense?
Okay, look, Fawaz, I'm thinking about what you're mentioning, and wallahi, it sounds amazing, and I'm trying to build this system and this and that, but I don't even know where to get started. Yani, I'm like, I don't have time. I have just too many responsibilities to start building systems for my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. The fact that you have no time genuinely shows that your systems are broken. That's the first thing. Like any entrepreneur who tells me I don't have time to sit down, reflect, or to reflect, check my systems or all of this, that shows clearly that your systems are broken. Like there's a serious issue, right? Because you're stuck in low level work. If you're telling me you don't have time to actually reflect or to double check your systems or to actually design the systems that are going to free up more time, right? That means you're lacking in automation, delegation, and clear workflows. Because if you had those things, then you would have more time. I've really started to, it's funny because all of my clients once said this. They really had the belief that for us, I would love to do these things, but I had no time. We started to work with them, and like we know, the first thing we do is our time audit. And you realize how much time entrepreneurs really have. They just do low leverage things. And that's exactly why you need to create the systems. For anyone who's sitting there thinking, I don't know if I have time though, that's exactly why you need this, right? That's exactly why you need this. So we design scalable systems that not only free up time, but they actually prevent it from being consumed by entropy in life. Does that make sense?
But see, when you mentioned that, like, time, if you do a time audit sheet, do you think that, or have you found from the 250 entrepreneurs you've worked with, that is it that their time is empty and they're not doing anything, or they are doing productive stuff?
They're very productive. Oh, they're so productive.
Okay.
It's always meetings, work. You start to investigate what was discussed in these meetings unnecessary. Could have been an Loom video, right? Wallahi, truth be told, right? You start to see, for example, going here or doing this thing that anybody could have done in the company but you. And it would have been far better for you to take an hour out of your day, clear your mind, reflect, see how the company is going, how to scale it. That would have done a lot more for your company than you going to do that productive task. But okay.
Okay, let's say, look, you mentioned, look, it's very difficult to really build these systems on your own because you have to have an understanding, first of all, how systems work and what are the different components and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, for as you're talking about how you can actually come in and build these systems. But the difference is, my business is just too unique, Yani. It's just, I don't think a system, you just haven't seen my business, so how are you able to build a system that will actually work for me? Maybe, yes, it's going to work for that e-com guy or that car dealership guy or that, but for me.
Yeah, because here's the thing, right? The issue we're facing today is majority of entrepreneurs, they steal their frameworks and the way they live from other people. And that's the problem. Their lives are unique. And that's not just you. Every single entrepreneur has a unique life. And in a way, unique business. And how we operate is very, very different, all right? The things that we care about more than others, yeah, we all have a general understanding, but every single entrepreneur has certain things that are unique to him as an individual or her. So that's the first thing we understand, right? And that's why we don't give you a cookie cutter solution, right? A one size fits all solution. And that's why we design your life by design, all right? Sorry, we design your life. All right, so we live by your design. What makes sense for you, not for anyone else.
Yeah,
we actually design it, because again, we focus on data. We're not like, we don't make suggestions or assumptions. We don't even take your assumptions into account. Like, we test them.
Yeah, but I know my life better than you.
Yeah, but the data, how many times do we think we know something and then data reveals something completely different? Right? A lot of people tell me they knew their bodies, then they went to the hospital. They don't know their bodies, right? They're ill.
They think,
then, yeah.
you know what? They think what they want to be the truth.
Exactly. Like, we need to come to terms of what is true versus what we like to be the truth, right? And a big difference happened. Let's be honest, like, we know, and like, you see, I feel like entrepreneurs feel like a lot of the times when we make these statements, it's an attack. You've been able to build a 7 and 8 figure business. You've done fantastic, right? I'm saying, why not do better? Why not grow better in an easier way, right? So this is what all comes down to. It's like most people build systems that don't account for their energy levels, right? They don't account for unpredictability in business, for life changes like family, travel, personal crises, things that happen. They don't have systems built for that. And that's why we create systems that actually flex with the person's life instead of requiring perfection, because we understand that nobody's life is perfect. We all deal with different kinds of entropy. And that's why we design lives based off of that. Does that make sense? There's crisis occurs, all right? Different things, like life implodes, essentially. That's what we design, not off perfection, like every day is going to look. No. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a big difference, because a lot of us, we read these books that tell us things which are probably true to a certain degree, but it's that reductionist mindset that you always talk about. So,
yeah, 100%, 100%, million percent. So yeah, that's the reality of the mindset, bro. That's the reality of the situation, of the nation. I got me.
Okay. But see, I still have another problem though with designing my life and talking about all these things. Like if I'm designing my life and I have a system on when I'm going to contact my family or when I'm going to do this, like that brings a lot of rigidness into my life.
Let's actually talk about this. A system gives you more flexibility, not less. All right? Systems actually give you more flexibility, not less. Bad systems are rigid. All right? Our systems are flexible. They're adaptable. Does that make sense to the situation? And that's why we build it. Because again, life isn't predictable. But in being intentional and working towards design, it's much, much more easier, right? It's not that you're not going to get stressed, etc. In fact, by the way, we encourage stress in our frameworks, in the way we design our clients' life. We encourage stress. How? I'm going to talk about that in the next podcast, inshallah. Stress is fantastic. Stress is really, really good for you in the right amounts, all right? And if you don't have stress, you're going to end up being complacent. Your life is going to be destroyed. Life loses sweetness. You don't grow. You don't evolve. Stress is fantastic. In fact, we thrive under stressful situations. We thrive in difficult circumstances. We thrive when things get hard, but only to a certain degree, which we're going to explore in the next podcast. We're going to explore in the next podcast. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a groundbreaking discovery.
Just one thing though.
Okay.
Do you think that's the biggest reason why entrepreneurs don't want to start working on their performance is because they like the stress?
They like the stress, right? And
they don't want to change it.
It's like they don't understand, a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand that stress is good, but in healthy amounts, right? And what's happened with a lot of these entrepreneurs is they've taken too much to where it's like unproductive, right? There's a whole thing I'm going to have to discuss on the next podcast, right? But it's very, very deep. It's about understanding how the mind itself works, right? But stress is good. There's nothing wrong with stress. So if you look at it, just to summarize everything we've discussed, there's 5 big reasons why entrepreneurs have these fragile systems, right? Number 1 is they copy systems that work for other people. They copy systems instead of designing systems that actually work for them, all right? What works for $100 million entrepreneur isn't going to work for you, right? And this is actually why we're actually very quite careful about the clients we work with, right? Because like, I even told you, like, I'm not very keen on mentoring certain guys that, had this revenue bracket that I was once in, because I don't fully understand their problems. It's not what I'm seeing today, right? But I mentor the guys who I'm in the space, with that space between, from making like, $1 million to, 10 million in a year. That's the kind of bracket I'm in. That's who we understand best, and that's who we serve, because that's how our lives are designed. So at the same time, we see a lot of these entrepreneurs who have like maybe these companies, they're copying strategies and frameworks of these big companies. It's not gonna work for you, right? Or these big entrepreneurs, how they live their life, I'm gonna live the exact same. No, you don't have the resources, you don't have the style, etc. For example, when you hire, and we've seen our company, when you hire these corporate style managers too early, it actually kills the agility of the company, right? You can't really scale, you can't really do what you guys are supposed to do, get too vibe because they're too corporate style. And your company doesn't need that at the moment. Does that make sense? Copying someone else's time management system when your responsibilities are different. You have 3 kids and you're copying a single guy's time management system, right? Or you live in one country and you're copying this guy's system. It's completely different. This is why you need to build systems that actually work for you. It's like a one-to-one. Even when my clients ask me what I do, I say, yeah, but keep in mind, I have X, Y, Z, and how I live my life isn't important, right? That's the way I've designed my life. In fact, funny enough, the way I live my life goes against the majority of what these entrepreneurs preach online. Like I'm talking like 99% of the big guys, what they preach online, my life looks completely opposite. But it works for me because I've spent a lot of time engaging in feedback loops, designing what makes sense for me, because I understand what kind of individual I am. For example, if you have ADHD, you don't have ADHD. It's a big difference, bro. So how can you copy somebody's system who doesn't have ADHD and you have? So we design to the individual. Does that make sense?
You mentioned one thing though. You said, but it works for me. I think that's a big problem though. That's a very problematic statement.
How?
Because a lot of the people listening to it is like, yeah, well, I've made it to 7 figures, yani that works for me.
Yeah, but have you optimized it? Have you actually optimized the system? Do you understand? And does it really work for you? I don't deal with burnout, right?
So what does work for me mean works for me in the most efficient way?
Yes, in the most efficient way possible, right? It's efficient. Why? Because I never get burnt out. It's like, let me explain, like I'm going to mention the thing we talked about, stress. I'm stressful to a point where this thing is difficult, but not where my body is giving up on me, right? So every day I maintain, even in the gym, I maintain enough stress to where this thing is challenging. This is difficult, but I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to exert for that. No, we have to design a life that works, right? And if there's constantly things breaking, your system is crap. It doesn't work. It needs to be always constantly be refined and fixed. Does that make sense? So my point is, you're designing a life. And it took me a while to design. A lot of entrepreneurs, they've just lived and they're changing certain elements. No, we have to build a proper design, right? One that goes with your biology, right? And that's the big thing. I'm going to talk about, like I said, the whole next podcast is going to be like how to actually work with your biology as an entrepreneur. Because you'll have to understand your biology. Everybody is slightly different. And understanding those differences in how you are as an individual, it's game changing.
Cool. So a lot of the entrepreneurs that listen to it's like, well, that sounds very interesting. I'm trying to build this kind of system, but of course I have too many things. I think the best thing therefore was, if you don't mind, that we're gonna get them to get on call with you specifically, and you're actually gonna audit themselves, look at their lives, their systems, understand them. And we can actually help them build that blueprint for free. You can get
100%. Yeah. So if you go in the description, book a free consultation with myself, inshallah, and we'll actually help you audit your life and see where the problems are occurring and areas you can scale. Because by the way, just to clarify, there's still areas that I'm learning and I'm always gaining more leverage from. Every day the performance is increasing, it's becoming better. Why? Because I'm understanding my leverage points and I'm solely giving all focus to them. Does that make sense?
Khalas, there's literally no harm in you coming on. We're literally going to see, okay, look, these are where your bottlenecks are. Let's look at how we can design that for improvement. And then, if it makes sense, it makes sense.
Bizabt, bro. Bizabt. That's exactly it, right? And so, yeah, guys, the next podcast, we're going to be showing you guys exactly how to work with your biology to scale, inshallah. So make sure you are tuned in for that one, inshallah. Comment how you found the podcast. If you guys have any questions as well, anything else you guys would like us to talk about, mention them in the description. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.